to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor Anderson.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's great to have everybody here this morning. And yesterday was St. Patrick's Day, as we all know. And so I thought it would be fitting in honor of Dan Forrest, who is our past club member. And I always think of Dan when we get around to St. Patty's Day. And he always had a good reflection on St. Patty's Day. And I always actually learned something from that. So it's good to have an invocation reflection from people that may have different perspectives and have different thoughts. And so Dan always inspired me with what he came up with. He also was a great joke teller. I am not necessarily the best joke teller, so I'm not going to tell a joke. But I did go online, and in the spirit of telling the truth, I stole this from Pastor Paul yesterday on Facebook. So there's my confession right off the bat. Because I thought it was a good summary of what St. Patrick's Day is all about. So yesterday, St. Patrick's Day, many do not know the true story of why St. Patrick was a saint. And it was not because he invented green beer or Irish whiskey. When Patrick was 16, he was kidnapped from England and taken to Ireland as a slave. He later escaped and returned to England. His time in captivity actually drew him closer to God. St. Patrick was willing to use this tragic circumstance in his life as a springboard to make a difference among the very people who had enslaved him. Rather than run away from conflict or opposition, St. Patrick moved right into it. Rather than buy into fear and say, well, that's a lost cause, he instead grew to love the outsiders and gave his life over to them. St. Patrick's tenacity and devotion to Christ served as a model for all who call themselves Christians. If you really want to honor St. Patrick and the Christ he served, the best way might be for you to do some things like these. Begin by connecting with someone you don't know. Offer a conversation to a person who really needs to have that conversation. Engage a person at work who may be difficult for you. Offer some help to a neighbor without being asked. Drop a note to someone who could use some encouragement. And finally, drop in or call someone who's struggling physically, emotionally, or spiritually. We are all called to be more like St. Patrick and walk among the people of our community. We all need to offer those around us hospitality and friendship. It's the kind of actions that can transform a community and even the world. And certainly, in the context of our motto as a Rotary Club, it offers us an opportunity for service above self. So may we say with conviction that there is a wee bit of Irish saint in all of us. That's as close as I get. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to gather as a club this morning, as friends and as fellow people that serve in this community. Bless the food that we are going to eat tonight and the hands that have prepared. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, let's do a test.
Testing. Can you hear me online? Got
Okay.
a thumbs up? Okay, great. Well, let's get back into this. I see we have an online guest. Bob with the last name iPad. Bob, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, this is an old Lakeville Rotary member doing makeup. I belong to the Minnetonka Rotary now, and I needed to make up, and so I thought I would join in. So hopefully I'm welcome.
Happy.
You're very welcome. You're welcome to come back anytime soon. Not just virtually. We miss you.
Well, thank you.
Well, enjoy the program. I think most of us know who you are, so we're happy to see your smiling face.
Thanks.
All right, so we have some announcements. We're had a board meeting yesterday, and I think we're looking to do an Arbor Day event with the city. We were hoping to do perhaps some tree plantings, but I also had a conversation with John Hennon, and we're welcome to help adopt a park. Several of the parks are already adopted, but our club could adopt a park and do like a morning cleanup when the weather allows for that. So that's going to be coming. Also, Richard is scheduling roadside cleanup, and maybe during this 1 minute, it basically I don't remember the date, settled on that. So, and then Alan, would you like to come up and talk about this is very important stuff here. It's our March Madness, so.
Take off my seasonal mask. So March Madness is back after a 1-year hiatus, and the brackets, everybody who took part in the past years should have received an email from CBS saying that the bracket is available. When I checked this morning, or when I did my own this morning, there's 14 that have been turned in so far. So I think 33 people took part 2 years ago. So there's we're about halfway to the number that we had before. Entry fee is $10. Just throw it in the either Venmo it or throw it in the basket when you come, and then that's where it comes out. And hopefully we'll see what happens. They've got 4, I think they're like 4 backup teams. So if somebody gets COVID out the first round, then they have somebody to step in. I would imagine that if you pick Kansas and then Kansas can't play, whoever they replace would step in for your bracket at that point. So if you have any questions, let me know. The games start tomorrow instead of today. So unlike prior years when they started on Thursdays, you have until Friday at 11 o'clock to get your brackets entered. If you're having trouble with the technology, if you just shoot me a copy of a paper bracket, I can get them entered for you before the 11 o'clock deadline tomorrow as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and yeah, it's good to get back with that fun. You've mentioned Kansas a couple of times with the COVID, so I suspect you might have some insight
Well,
information.
they're left 3 players behind for the first round.
Oh, he does have some skinny on that.
So they could be pretty bad. So, well, part of it I have to say it's fun making fun of Kansas. Despite Iowa State going 118 and
Iowa State.
Well, I'm not talking from a position of where we were going to challenge them.
Maybe next year. Oak Springs Eternal. Taste the Lakeville in a minute. Richard, take it away, sir.
Okay, good morning. We'll have a quick meeting right after we break up from here. Just a couple of, for participation, Lakeville team, just a couple of things. The home expo is coming up on the 17th of April. So
No.
there'll be some,
May 15th.
I thought they changed that. All right. I was going to ask you about.
You dreamt it.
What did you
Anything
say?
else you got to say, Richard?
All right, on to auction. Okay, so Cheryl's going to be reaching out to you. Remember the $100. Remember the key point of working with people to put together good auction items. And we're doing a lot of outreach. All of the team is working on that. So please be thinking about that. That's the one thing you can do as a club member right now to help raise a lot of money. I think about 1/3 of it will come from auction. And thank you to Dan Perez joined the auction team. Yeah, thank you. And start thinking about tickets. So we are going to start selling those. I think those are the highlights on the Taste of Lakeville. So we do have a road cleanup coming on the 20th of April. So it's been a while, and it'll be a lot of fun. Just be like 5:45, and so it's been. I think it's almost been 2 years. But the most important thing is we have at the end of it, we have the risque roadkill contest, and my intel sources tell me despite the COVID-19 lockdown, there's been a lot of tawdry seediness going on in Lakeville. So we'll find that, fix that trash up. So it's gonna be a good contest. So we expect to have a good road kill contest afterwards, and it's a lot of fun. We've been convened at Greenville to have beer, great Alaska amber, so please be there, be square. And thanks for the whatever.
Go ahead, we got a minute.
She's on the auction.
Oh, I'll do it. Go ahead. Kathy Moynihan has agreed to be part of the online auction committee too. So I'll have a round of applause. Yes. And thanks, Richard, for showing the dirty underside of Lakeville after our mayor had just been touting, the greatness of our city to our guests today. So, unfortunately, there's something I need to mention. The board has asked me to bring this up, and it's about policy. So the club directory is published for the use of the Rotarians in Lakeville Rotary Club. The primary purpose is to provide contact information for club members and club officers. In addition, it provides easy reference to pertinent data, which is useful to all club Rotarians. The club directory is not for distribution to Rotarians, and its use as a commercial mailing or emailing list for non-Rotary purposes is specifically prohibited. I believe mentioning the above statement might resonate with many of our new members, as they may not be aware that they shouldn't be receiving unsolicited propaganda or business solicitations that are unrelated to Rotary, period. All right, sorry I had to do that, but the board thought it needed to be mentioned. So now on to our guest speaker, Kendall Qualls. Many of you probably recognize him as he was running for U.S. Congress last fall. And Kendall Qualls is the president of Take Charge Minnesota. He was also the 2020 Republican candidate for Minnesota's 3rd congressional district. Mr. Qualls has a unique vantage point to convey the Take Charge message and to plant the seeds of change desperately needed in the Twin Cities and across the country. During his childhood, Mr. Qualls lived with his divorced mother and siblings in public housing projects of Harlem, New York in the late 1960s. Before middle school, Mr. Qualls left New York City to live with his father in a trailer park in Oklahoma. Neither of his parents finished high school. Despite the challenges and turmoil of his early life, Mr. Qualls worked full-time to pay his way through college, served as an officer in the U.S. Army, earned 3 graduate degrees, including an MBA from the University of Michigan. He worked his way up the ranks to become vice president at several Fortune 100 healthcare companies. Mr. Qualls champions the principles of meritocracy and supports the notion that free enterprise and the private sector are the fastest and most equitable way to lift people from poverty to prosperity, including Black Americans. Mr. Qualls has been married to his wife Sheila for 35 years, and they have 5 children together. He was a mentor at Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. He serves on the board of Lundstrom's Performing Arts Center in North Minneapolis, as well as Hope Farm School, a school for at-risk boys from Minneapolis. Please welcome Mr. Qualls.
Well, thank you. You know what? I want to make sure I have give my speech and Richard, this idea of the seedy part of town. That's just got a different version from Doug. So I might have to try it this way. Well, thank you so much for having me. I always like attending Rotary clubs. You guys just have a really your heart for your community, heart for your country, civic minded, and it's glad to see such robust participation here and virtually as well. So I'm going to stand here. Typically I move quite a bit, but for the sake of our online attendees, I'll stay put. Okay. So in the spirit of a different message, learning a different perspective, you're going to hear something from me that's a little bit of different perspective on the narrative that we hear today, specifically as it relates to critical race theory. What are some of the issues that we hear consistently right now on a national perspective, as well as local with the upcoming trial, and a different perspective. And I think it's one that's more healthy, one that's traditional for us as an American spirit, how we solve problems, and how we come together again as Americans. So with that said, see if I can get this.
Here, I'll just do it.
Okay, here we go. So this is my narrative around this. If you heard the term critical race theory, may not be familiar with that term, but you might be familiar with the concept of white privilege. What else do they call it? Systemic racism. All of that is a false narrative. And I say that with definitive affirmity that it's a false narrative, not just because I know it and I grew up with it. It's because it is putting the fault on something, I call it a misdiagnosis. And we're going to go through this and I'll tell you what it's more predominantly about. It's more predominantly about a two-parent disparity than it is racial disparity when we go through that. So let me give you some historical perspective, specifically the Black community. If you go on the next slide, this is a Black community before the help that we got from the government of the Johnson administration's war on poverty. Traditionally, the Black American culture was focused on faith, family, and education. Faith, family, and education. It's the one demographic that was very vocal about where they believed in and their religious beliefs. There's the one demographic, you can see, especially in the 50s, 60s, didn't have much material-wise, but we had all we needed because we had family, we had faith. And even American Black slaves were punished and tortured for just learning to read. So education was paramount from the very beginning. And if you go to the next slide, this kind of gives you an idea. This is a historical, this is something I don't believe they teach much in history today in our schools, but this is called the Second Great Migration. Literally, especially after World War II, maybe 5 million Black Americans left segregated South and to try to find better opportunities and live with dignity and respect as human beings in the North. And obviously there were the jobs there as well. And you can see this great, huge 5 million people basically migrating up that wasn't really documented at the time. But my parents were in that lot as well. You go to the next slide. That's my dad. He spent 25 years in the Army. He was a drill sergeant. You can see that slide, that picture of him in the middle, that's him smiling. That's what he did. Trust me, when you're a teenage son, you never get in trouble when your dad's drill sergeant. You may do it one time, but you'll never want to be seen again. That never happens. But the next slide. Unfortunately, when my dad came back from Vietnam, my parents divorced, and we lived in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the 101st Airborne. And my siblings and I, my mother took us to live with her parents, my grandparents, in Harlem, New York. That's where they lived. So in next slide, you see the next. This was day one when we get off the Greyhound bus on Grand Central Station. We take a city bus to Harlem, and we're a block away from my grandparents' apartment and get held up and brought in. And I'm in the second grade. I'm looking around. I'm just waiting to see someone do something. I'd never forget my mother's words. She said, "Please, mister, this is all the money I have. I have 5 kids." And some guy standing just, not that far away from us, he said, "Lady, you better give that man all your money. He doesn't care if you have 5 kids or 10 kids." I'm going like, you know what? This is not Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and this is, my world changed. Literally, what you see going on in New York City today, where I live. I know what it's like to live in a place where they unfund the police. It's not a pretty sight. The mobs, the thugs rule the streets. Next slide. Unfortunately, my mom couldn't handle all 5 of us by herself. My older brothers and sisters were getting absorbed into the street culture of Harlem. Literally, there's statistics of the inner cities that we see today. And so my father came and got me and my younger brother to live with him in Oklahoma. He was paying child support and alimony, and all he could afford was a trailer in Oklahoma. And so I've been called a ghetto kid, trailer trash, and a lot worse. But when I tell people what's neat about our country is where you start in life is not where you have to stay in life. So that's up to you and what you're going to do with that. Okay, next slide. And so this is a picture, a portrait of my family. I don't have a family picture of us all together. So this was basically a kind of depiction of my life and what I grew up in. When my parents divorced, unfortunately, I had 3 siblings that were incarcerated. 4 of them got involved in drugs. And you know what? For me, I wanted a different life, and I didn't know how to do it. And go to the next slide. But I knew it started with an education. So I got as much of it as I could. I paid my way through college. I worked full time. I was in the Army Reserves. I actually got commissioned in the Army Reserve when I was 19 years old. So I was a second lieutenant, 19, a junior in college. And when I graduated, I went on active duty, and I got 2 of those degrees on active duty. So for me, it was about education. But one of the things I learned along the way when I got my degrees, I said, man, you know what? What I learned in the course of my life, I didn't need all education because I already had a PhD. Well, what do you mean? You can't get a PhD without that? Well, I was poor, hungry, and determined. You know, in this country, that's 75% of what you need is fire in the belly to do something to better yourself. Yes, education is good. I'm not dispensing that at all. Getting a trade certification, getting education, that's 25%. The 75% is get up and get at it, right? So that's what I learned. That's what I had. So next slide. So the top part of that slide is my military career. I spent time here in the U.S. and in South Korea, right on the DMZ. I tell you, we got great stories about our country. You look at South Korea today, their cars are ubiquitous. Honda, IKEA, and all that. 50 years ago, they were struggling because they were big poverty as a country. And the only reason why they're prosperous today is because men and women in this room, all of us in the United States, guarantee their freedom from the North Koreans that want to really take over that country. This is my civilian career. I spent 5 years in active duty, and the rest of my career has been in healthcare, leading marketing teams, sales teams, leading business units, $850 million business unit. I'll tell you a quick story about J&J. So their headquarters is based in New Jersey. I started in sales and bottom up and worked my way up business unit. I'm 37 years old when I'm in New Jersey. It's about an hour away from New York. Literally less than an hour if it wasn't for traffic. You know how that is. You could be there in 30 minutes. But I have a $95 million budget. I'm managing a $1 billion brand. And I'm literally less than an hour away from the place where we're held up in Harlem, New York. 30 years previous. Only in America something like that happened. And I'm sharing this with you not to brag about my progress in my career, but I tell you from the top and the bottom, my military, my civilian career, my personal life, people that helped me along the way were black and white, rich and poor, male and female. Americans help each other when they see someone trying to better their lot in life. They don't put a filter on it. When they see someone trying to do something, to help others, to help themselves, we help out. And so for me, I couldn't stand still. And when I heard this whole thing about our country systemically racist, that's not true. There's white privilege, that's not true either. And you know what? For me, especially if you I call myself a Christian, and one of the things that we stand up for when we see evil, we don't abide by it. When we see something that's wrong or a falsehood, we don't stand. I could not stand up and allow that narrative to happen in our country without doing or saying something. So it's one of the reasons I got involved in politics. It's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing today. Next slide. So it's funny, when I got out of the military, for me, it was all about career success and financial achievement. Someone invited me to church. and I'm keeping this personal. I'm not trying to evangelize at all. This is personal for me. Someone invited me to church. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I didn't think it was relevant in my life. And fortunate for me, Tony Evans was a pastor of this church. I'd never heard the Bible taught that way before, not preached, but taught. And along my career path, Maxim Plato was one of our pastors when we lived in San Antonio. He's a pretty prolific Christian author. And as well as Joe Stoll. Joe Stoll used to be president of Moody Bible College. Next slide. So I shared that to tell you it was a long journey to get here. You know, I've been very fortunate and blessed. My wife and I have raised 5 kids. We have one that's now married. They're in their, our kids are the only ones in my family, nieces and nephews that I have, their cousins, that knows what it's like to grow up with a mother and father now. It's tragic. It's tragic. And again, this will get to the latter part of what I'm getting ready to share. It's one of the problems we're trying to solve in our country. Next slide. So what happened to the Black family? Next one. So if you think about where we were, again, when I talk about the history of the Black family, all the way through the Great Depression, okay, think about the 20s and 30s and 40s, you would think with sanctioned segregation, the Black family would have been destroyed back then, but listen, literally, if they look, up into the 60s, there's almost 80% two-parent families. What changed? Well, after Martin Luther King was assassinated, there 3 months after that, there was the last of the civil rights bills were passed, and we started getting people in our community that we never heard of, like a community organizer and political activists. Like we never heard of those job titles before, and you actually get paid for them. Well, they came with programs and ways to help, and at the end of the day, they could give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe those programs were with good intentions. Next slide. But here's something that's, when you think about it, you would think, why would we ever do something like this? Where the federal government actually pays women to have children out of wedlock and remain unmarried. The first time in American history that ever happened. To remain unmarried is a financial, and look, I've been in the private sector my entire life, and you know what, show me the financial incentives, and I'll show you the behaviors. And this is what we've had, and it was pushed heavily in the 60s and the 70s. Next slide. And this is the beginning of the disparity that we see today. Go on, next one. So Daniel Patrick Moynihan, he was a senator from New York, U.S. Senator in New York. And before he was a senator, he was actually working in the LBJ administration. And he wrote a report that said, hey, right now the Black Americans are at 24% of them of births are from unwed moms. If this continues, this will be catastrophic. They will not be able to benefit from the riches and the wealth of our society if they start out in life like this. He was ignored, he was mocked, and you see what happened, that's a huge jump, right? In the 60s and 70s and 80s, we go from 24% to 72%, and in North Minneapolis, like 90%, north side of Minneapolis, 90% fatherless homes. Okay, so next slide. And obviously, with that corresponding, behavior, you see marriage decline significantly in the Black community. Next slide. Now, all these slides I'm sharing with you are all published data. This is not, something I, pulled off the shelf. U.S. government published data. So you go from this cultural norms to this. Again, Black community at that time, we didn't have much, but then we had decency, respect. My dad, from South Carolina. I always saw him with a collared shirt and pant and a shirt tucked in a pant. They were polyester. They were knit, from Kmart or what, but they were neat. They were on the left, and that's how he had us. Not on the right. And when I went on the campaign trail, I always used to say, Black community didn't used to live like this. This is not who we were. Next slide. And as a result of this is the data that we have. Again, published data. This is either state crime statistics or FBI national statistics. When you look at this, 90% of runaways are fatherless homes. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you get the gist. We're creating an environment, especially with how we're still incentivizing unwed births, and it's not the best way to start a civilization or maintain one. Next slide. So we're number one in all the wrong things. We're going to go through these quickly. Next one. So the CDC publishes a report every year on the health of its U.S. citizens, and they do it by demographic. Within Black males, you see in this one, number one cause of death for ages 1 to 19. Typically, you see these as birth defects, cancer, especially in the youth and in a pediatric population. But homicide is not number one in any other demographic. Absolutely sad. Number one, age 1 to 19, number one cause of death is homicide. And those are not police shootings. These are within, black on black crimes. Same thing within ages 20 to 44. Next slide. This is a study that was published from Kaiser Family Foundation, Kaiser Permanente organization in 2012. Black Americans number one in cancer. It's not that we get cancer more than any other demographic. Problem is that we don't get the early screenings that you get to catch it, detect it, and remove it. And so it's a screening issue, not a higher rate of disease issue. Next slide. Black Americans are only 12% of the population, but we're number one in cases of sexually transmitted diseases. This is a report from the CDC as well. Next slide. Number one in cases, again, and HIV for same-sex or heterosexual relationships. Again, we're only 12% of the population, but number one in these cases. Next slide. And then, again, education was paramount in the Black community. I mean, again, you think about the board, what was the first Supreme Court case was Brown versus the Board of Education. That's during the Eisenhower era, okay? Because education was important for the Black community. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see for 4 years in a row since starting 2017, the kids in Minneapolis do worse than any other demographic. Literally a third of them passing the standardized test for math here in this particular segment. Now, it's not that these kids can't perform. They're the same kids from these same communities. They go to Hope Academy, Ascension, Crystal Way, these faith-based schools. They're performing above the national average. Same neighborhood, same streets, same kids. Next slide. And then, in fact, this is the slide here. I'm one actually on the board of one of these schools here. And you may know some of these. We do. So, again, this is not a skin color issue. Next slide. And in fact, the issue that we're raising here, this is not a skin color issue because, unfortunately, this type of family situation issue that we're having is permeating beyond and spreading beyond the Black community. Go to the next slide. You can see where we are as a country. For the first time in American history, we have unwed births at 50%. And you think about where are these school shootings? I mean, this never happened before. Well, the reason those things never happened before is because this has never happened before. This is something that we have to take a look at as a country, locally, nationally. Is this something? How do we address this? I mean, we talk about all the things that we're doing to make our schools safe, and then obviously the model of America. I mean, what are we going to do to try to make all our communities safe when the ultimate issue is, hey, how do we get back to our cultural norms as a country? Next slide. So how do we change that? And so what I'm doing full time as far as take charge. Next slide. Is helping us return back to our cultural roots. And so if you guys are football fans and if you know the Super Bowl trophy is called the Lombardi Trophy. The reason why it's called the Lombardi Trophy is obviously the historical aspect of Vince Lombardi and when he first went into the Green Bay. And if you know this history about this, he basically said to the team, this is the football. And it was really about getting back to the basics of football, getting back to the basics of blocking and tackling, everything, the essence and the root of the game. And obviously they were a very successful franchise, winning several championships before it was a Super Bowl and then the first 2 Super Bowls. This is what we're going to do in our community. We're going to get back in the Black community to faith family, and education. We don't need the government help to do it. Next slide is, well, who's gonna lead the charge? And I always say, you know what, I'm collecting the most aggressive, effective fighting force known on earth. Next slide. Moms. Moms change the world. And I truly believe that. And in fact, there's facts for it. I would tell people we forget that the reason why we have the DUI laws we have today, stringent ones, it wasn't because of some sanctimonious politician. It was because mothers against drunk drivers were mad that these guys are getting such soft sentences and getting back in the streets and killing more people, that they changed the DUI laws that we have today. And we're going to do the same thing with moms in the Black community. They're going to be the boots on the ground. And this is where my military army analogies will be coming in. Next slide. And here's what I want to do. I'm going to recruit 10 cohorts of women. And each cohort will have 4 to 6 women involved. And those women, I call them ambassadors, if you will, take charge ambassadors. They are going to educate the Black community of going back to our cultural roots. They're going to use some of these slides of what's happened to us. And we're going to talk about where we're going to go in the future. And then why did it happen? And again, just because of programs out there doesn't mean we got to take advantage of it. All right? And so by the end of the year, we will have literally over 100 women educating the Black community, going back to our cultural roots. Again, they're going to be the boots on the ground. Next slide. We're going to give them air support because we don't send troops out there by themselves. And the air support we're going to have is, if you've seen any of the videos that we released, we just released a new one this week. And then we can have that shown maybe later. I'll send you a link to it after this program. But they're going to be great. And you know, people learn by stories and good, snappy, professionally done videos. So we're going to do that. 3 ad segments with the moms telling their stories. In fact, I can just tell you that when I say recruit 10 cohorts, I've already recruited 2 without any effort. I mean, some of these ladies found out what I was doing. I got 2 cohorts of women, 11 women already involved without any effort on my own. They said, we need to do this. We've been waiting for a long time, been praying about it. I have a woman that was an attorney, grew up in a 2-parent family, and was waiting for something like this and praying for something like this. I have a woman that was a former welfare mother, got out of that, and wants to stop young girls from making the same mistakes. I got a couple that they both were raised by single moms. So we're getting people involved. And once we launched this video this week, it was so well done. I got people calling me from Minneapolis wanting to connect and get involved, men and women. And so we're going to have the moms involved, profiles of success. We're going to highlight young boys and girls that have graduated from these schools of Hope Academy, Ascension, and they're in college and they're in their first job. We're going to highlight these kids. Well, how did you make this work? Well, this is this old-fashioned program called hard work, stay out of trouble, don't have kids before you get married, and guess what? It works. Okay, we're going to highlight these kids because we rarely see young people this age anymore if they're not involved with the police department or something. And then lastly, we're going to highlight hidden heroes. You know, this idea of white privilege and racist people in the community. There are people that have been helping the Twin Cities for decades. Before there was the Black Lives Matter, before there were all these smart people saying that, you're guilty of white privilege. I mean, these people are helping because they have a heart for their fellow man. They have a heart for helping out people in dire straits. And I want to, they don't brag about their what they do. Number one is they don't feel good about bragging about it. It's not consistent with their faith and their teaching, but I can brag about it. So we're going to be interviewing some of these people, and we're going to be sharing not only with the Twin Cities, but out in the community that Americans have been doing this stuff for years without any type of direction. And so we as a culture need to kind of step forward. And how do we start cleaning up our own tent, our own house? Next slide. And so we're going to talk about not only the negative parts about fatherless homes, we're going to talk about the benefits of marriage. Next slide. And right now, like the Justice Department has data, crime statistics on domestic abuse. Basically, where do they go when they have to when they're called and the cases that go to court? They find that marriage and women that are widowed are the safest safest relationship when it comes to men and women, right? And it's usually the live-in relationships, the ex-boyfriends, the boyfriends where they get called for domestic violence. Next slide. And this slide is always, it's a funny one to be put on. It says, married men monitor their key metrics more than unmarried men. And then, this is again published data. It shows married men that I said, well, you know what? This is not the married men doing this. Trust me. This is my wife telling me, you better get down there and get your colonoscopy. You better get down and get your prostate checked. Like, and all the fun stuff. So anyway, so this is the benefits of marriage. So when we talked about earlier about how Black Americans were number one in cancer diagnosis, it's because they weren't getting this early screening. Family structure helps with this stuff. Next slide. And then lastly, and go to the next one, please. Lastly, this slide alone should be a public service announcement by state and federal level. When childhood poverty drops by over 90% by any ethnic group because of one variable, marriage, okay, childhood poverty drops by these significant numbers across any ethnic group. It should be promoted at a state. I mean, think about not just the money saved, the lives that are saved, the childhood abuse and everything else is just incredible. So since they're not going to do it, I'm going to do it, and we're going to take charge. Next slide. So, and while we're in the meantime, while we're fixing marriage and getting families rebuilt, education is going to be the quickest pathway for these young kids, and we're going to make this happen. It's sad. I was asked to testify at a committee in state capitol, and it was school choice was being debated, and it won at the Senate level, but in this committee, but it probably never passed the House or it's signed by the governor. So I'm going to do everything I can to help raise funds to help get these kids out of these schools and give them at least a pathway to success. So that's one of the things we're doing, school choice. Next slide. And really, you think about these mothers, and we can condemn people for the choices they make. Sometimes grown-ups don't realize, man, I ruined my life, but I don't have to ruin the life of my child. I want to give them an opportunity. And if their school doesn't give them that, then there's no reason why they should keep sending their kids to a place that's dangerous. And we know that is not, for 4 or 5 years, have not been training these kids to be ready for not just college, any tech training or any trade schools. I wouldn't send my kids to a doctor that wasn't giving them well. Why would I send them to a school that's not educated? It's asinine. You think about it. So with that, next slide. So what we're sharing with these moms and getting them involved and having them boots on the ground, that they can literally change their communities. And you know what? And I've already gotten calls about how from 3 different states, when can you come to our state and do this? We'll get there. Let's get it set up here in Minneapolis first. Next slide. And next one, please. And so we're doing on April 3rd, Saturday, April 3rd, between Good Friday and Easter. We're spreading the message that, hey, look, if you want to join us, please do. But definitely in the Black community, where we're asking people to spend that day with a day of prayer and fasting, because we know that again, this is again, I'm not trying to evangelize at all, just sharing our faith, my faith, and what we're sharing with this program. Is that we turn our hearts to God throughout the Old and New Testament. It says, you know what, turn your hearts back to me, I'll turn my hearts back to you. And I'll restore your people and I'll restore your land. And that's been on the day on Easter, we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We're praying that this will be the start of the resurrection of the American Black family. Next slide. And because what we could have is a Minneapolis is known for this right now, with George Floyd, the death of George Floyd and the riots, and the riots started last year, or it could be known for this, is where the city, where it all started, the resurrection of the American Black family. I think I would have this be known for the latter than the former. But I'll end here and see if there's any questions.
We probably will have questions. If you wouldn't mind repeating it back for the benefit of our, repeating back the question for the benefit of our Zoom visitors.
Which
question?
Yeah, which question?
Whatever questions come up.
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Oh. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I'm not evangelizing, but God bless you. It is a monumental task. And I just think it's great. I don't know how we can keep government out of it. They're just so overpowering. But tell me, can you quickly tell me about Hope Farm? Where is it and when did it start?
Sure. So the question was about Hope Farm School. Where is it? When did it start? So if you're familiar with Hope Academy and the guys who started that, and I just God bless them, it's Jeff and Wade Bird. They lived in the suburb. They lived in Shasta, moved downtown to start this school 20 years ago. Hope Academy. And so Hope Academy takes kids starting from kindergarten, first grade. They don't take them from like starting in 8th or 9th because they're so far behind in 8th and 9th that they won't be able to keep up with the kids in the Hope Academy. So they started Hope Farm Schools for some of these kids that are in high school, junior high, that they have no place up. They fall through the cracks and they'll be on the streets. And so it's a farm that they had in just on the other side of the border in Wisconsin. And I'm on the board there. I've been out there. They have 200 acres. And these boys that again have been lost, you know, they're from minority, Black, Hispanic, predominantly kids. And basically, old time they have a bee farm. You know, they're honey, chickens, cows. They're growing acres, crops. They live in a bunkhouse. It's pretty cool. It's old school farmland type stuff. And they sell their produce, you know. So they're learning science, they're learning economics and everything, real time, practical stuff. Yes, sir.
Do you think this is your calling versus your congressional race? Did losing that get you involved with this more? And then secondly has Take Charge Minnesota received its 501(c) status?
Okay, so the question for the guys virtual is, do I think, or does he think losing was the calling to get me here to take charge, and do we have our 501(c) status yet? So I'll answer the latter first. We don't have our 501(c) yet. We filed for it in December. We hope to get in the next 3 to 4 weeks. But we still receive donations because if you've seen the video, you'll see this is the top of the quality that we're going to put out, the communication we're going to put out. Second, you know what? I always believe that things happen for a reason. I didn't win. Like I was sharing earlier, you know what? Our country is much better than the leaders that serve us. And I just felt so compelled to run because for me, I was at my limit. I go like, geez, what is going on here? And at the end of the day, you know, this country is about patriots. And, you know, you look at our history, the people that served the country were patriots. They weren't politicians. And to your point, I said, look, if I can't help it in that way, I'll try to help this way. I'm a private sector guy. I've never done anything like this. I'm not a pastor, not a preacher, but I'm a problem solver. You know, I get things done. And you know, if anything, if I could show and remind us as Americans that we do things like this historically all the time, that's what makes us what we are, makes us who we are. And so be it. And we're going to do this. And you're right. This is a monumental task. But for those that are, you know, like I am, like Christians, with men, it's impossible. With God, all things are possible. So we're walking in faith, and it's amazing how things are working out. People are coming, men and women are coming from the community who want to do this, to turn our culture back. And people are helping with funds to help us communicate that. Because the narrative that they're offering this thing, white privilege, it is so, not only is it so wrong, it was the least that started the problem. That welfare program to fund women, keep money coming in when they remain unmarried. was a program came out of the elite private schools, the Ivy League schools. And now they want to, blame it on suburban America. That's not true. So anyway, yes, sir.
Thank you for being here today. Really grateful to hear your message. And my question is this. Alan made a comment earlier about the Super Bowl, whether you win or lose, there's always damage done to a community, and whether they're celebrating a win or a loss, it doesn't matter. There's rioting in the streets. Regardless of the outcome of the Chauvin trial, what will it take to keep the community calm? Is there any way to avoid rioting and burning in Minneapolis at trials?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there was a way to avoid the riot that we started. Again, I was sharing with your mayor here, Doug. What I've learned as a kid growing up and as an adult, and as much as everyone had a favorite athlete as a kid, their favorite team, but you realize it's less about the players and more about the coach. And what I've learned about the city leadership, city politics, and how neat the city is less about the city, more about the leaders of those cities. Riots could have been prevented. Okay, strong hands, strong leadership, and whatever happens from the trial can be prevented as well. We know what could happen, and are we prepared as the city leaders to ensure that it doesn't happen again? It just takes a strong hand. Yes, sir.
First of all, get the luck.
Your tables had like an overrepresentation. So we'll get you yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you again for being here, Kendall. Very inspiring, very educational. My question is, because there are so many fatherless families out there, you've got the gang influence on young men. In your opinion, what needs to be done to tackle the gang influence to keep these kids on the straight and narrow?
Right. So I mentioned that with the moms that are helping. The next video that we're going to put out will be men, married men specifically, talking about what change needs to happen in the behavior of men and expectations of what they need to do to step up in the community. And now this is not going to happen overnight, but you know what? As long as we get the acknowledgement of the problem and it begins to tilt the direction, we're heading in the right direction. Yes, yes, sir.
So I was listening to a radio station yesterday morning, and a gentleman called in. His daughter is a kindergartner at Robbinsdale Cooper public school system. He goes, "What'd you learn in school today, sweetie?" She said, "I learned that white people are mean to black people." So this critical race theory has already permeated deeply into our public schools at a level of kindergartens already, locally. I'm wondering, what should we do about that to not talk about race? We should but to not let our leaders, because the community is all about your leaders, basically force these false dogmatic philosophies on our children as young as 5 years old.
I totally agree. I tell you guys, this is an issue, and I'll end with this one, but I don't know if this may be controversial, I don't know if this is being taped or not, but I don't care.
I could stop it.
So no. But here's the saddest issue, and this is man, we have to remind us who we are as Americans. They're forcing this narrative down the throats of your kids, of his parents, without any consensus. There's no discussion around this. There's no consensus that yes, we all agree that this is what should happen. There was none of those kind of discussions. Ran down the throats. We know best. And what's sad is they're using your tax dollars, your property tax dollars, to tell your kids that your racism in the country is bad. That is the worst thing ever. And what I've learned, on the campaign trail, they'll never stop. I don't care how much you complain, I don't care how much you petition, how much you write, they'll keep going. The only way to stop it, is that you have to organize amongst other parents and say, we have to pull our kids out. Now I know that's freedom, liberty, everything else is a sacrifice. It's not free. And Sharon, remember, we homeschooled our kids. I didn't, we didn't know we were going to miss a bullet like we did. We didn't get indoctrinated. But these are your kids, and this is your tax dollars. You're paying them to educate your kids, and they're using your money to turn your kids against you and your country. And at a certain point, you have to decide whether or not that's going to happen. I know what I would do. I would get my kids out there so fast they would be like a parking lot. I would escape them. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. And I know our club, I think I mentioned to you earlier, we haven't had the privilege of having too many in-person speakers, but we really, really appreciate that. And I'm sure that our members online do as well. Every speaker that comes in, we give them, perhaps you're familiar with this, it's the Rotary coin with our 4-way test. So we'd like you to have that. And then an honorarium will be given in your name to Treehouse, which is an organization of the Twin Cities to help at-risk group. And keep us, please, updated as to how yours is going. And because we're always looking to get behind great causes, and Rotary just loves the message that you have. So thank you very much. Okay, we've hit just about everything except for the Master at Arms.
Yep.
And it's Sheila and Sheila. Wake up, Sheila.
Wake up, Sheila.
It's not nap time yet.
I don't know where the fast.
Yeah, Beth, your name was on.
Yeah. Where's the fast?
I'll keep it, I'm gonna tap just these two tables here. No. It's hard to do. Hey, what happened to our other people? Come on. Okay, so obviously a lot of attention was made to St. Patty's Day yesterday. And for the being Irish, actually yours is a carryover. You still got the same shirt on and
I never
went to bed. But there's another feast that's celebrated in March, and named the fictional saint.
Is this our thing?
Saint Erho. Well, very good. And where did this Saint Erhos originate?
Moynihan, Minnesota. Or Finlandia, there's argument.
Where did it originate?
We're on the
You're on the follow-up.
Norway.
Actually, he's correct, but it was in Finland, Minnesota. By Finnish Americans to celebrate their heritage, and it's now celebrated all over the world. Oh yeah. But anyway, I've come up with a third question. Okay, these two tables here.
You owe me.
Yes.
And actually, you kind of stole part of my questions here because there's an overlap. But we all know that you didn't add this, that St. Patrick chased the snakes out of Ireland. I know it's a legend.
All did it add that.
So
that's not true. I can explain it.
You're all ears, I can tell.
Yeah, it's a symbolic thing. Obviously, in the Garden of Eden, there was a serpent or a snake, and because of so many people converted in the hundreds of churches he started, they symbolically put up and talked about the snakes or the evil leaving the island. It's not a literal snake; it's a symbolic theological snake.
Therefore, that's why I'm wearing my boots.
Just in case we're still wrong. Okay, so obviously, not to be outdone, what was the legend of St. Erho? These two tables. Erho. Where have you been? Talk about distracted. Give, you give? Paul, do you know the answer?
I didn't hear the question.
Wow. What is the legend of, not to be outdone by the snakes, what is the legend of St. Gervais?
I know that they celebrated on March 16th, not March 17th. I know that was established in Finland, Minnesota. I've done some work up there in a camp called Service to Others in rural Minnesota. And what I do recall is they believed that he was a servant nature. They started in the 1950s. I remember that too. And it had, but I don't know any miracles that he performed other than that he served his people.
Well, that's very nice, but that's not the answer. He chased grasshoppers out of Finland, thus saving the grape crop and the jobs of the Finnish vineyard workers. Okay, well, we still need to ask you one more question.
No, that was Terry Carradine. Chase grasshopper.
That's a clap. And now I'm going to go to this day in history, but again, now the 18th, March 18th. Hitler and Mussolini met at Brenner Pass on this date in 1940. What happened at that meeting?
I don't know if they know.
Anybody on the screen have an answer? Nobody knows.
Are you talking about Hitler and Mussolini?
I am.
Yeah, they began to work on what's called the Allied Front because of the discussions that they had regarding the upcoming war.
Well, it's close. They agreed to join forces, yes, against the French and Britain.
Right.
I like Paul's
but
answer.
Follow up. On this date, U.S. bombers attacked Berlin. How many bombers were involved?
1,200.
You were so close, 1,250.
I know the reason. They all had to have pre-marriage counseling prior to their bombings. And that's where the prepared and enriched inventories came from that I use to this day.
Wow. We're getting educated today. Happy dollars on a happier note.
My daughter goes to the University of Minnesota Engineering, and she passed her fundamentals of engineering exam.
I got a happy $5. There's a budding new organization in Lakeville called the Lakeville Faith Community. And mark your calendars, May 5th, the day before the National Day of Prayer. There is a prayer breakfast being sponsored here at Brackett's. Thank you, Steve, for providing the room. And there's a limit of 200 people. Our own Pastor Paul Marzon is going to be the MC. Super Bowl winning champion Ben Utek is going to be providing the music. And Dr. Charles Karuk, who was, he and his wife Lindsay were one of the first pastorals down on 38th in Chicago the afternoon of George Floyd's death, is going to be the keynote speaker. So just mark your calendars, May 5th. It'll be 7 to 8:30 in the morning. And hopefully tickets are $25 a piece, and there's a free will donation offering at that point, and anything over the $25 is going to be matched. There's a anonymous corporate donor who's going to be matching up to $5,000 to get this thing up and running. So we're not looking at this as an event, but more of a way that we can start to incorporate faith into the city in a time that we probably need it most. So Kendall, thank you very much for your words again today. It's great. The invitation is open for you and as many as you'd like to bring as well. And hope to see you again. Thank you.
No, it's not basketball. So I don't know if I should be putting money in the basket because we now have a third licensed driver in our household. We had to take her down to Mankato on Monday in the snow so she could do her driver's test, and she passed. And so now I came home from taking Ashley to the basketball practice the other night at like 9:30 at night. Riley's car was gone. She was there when I left. And so I wasn't sure what happened. One of her friends called and said she was able to drive to her friend's house, and Emily had given her a curfew at 10:30, and then following in, my footsteps, not necessarily Emily's footsteps. That to her meant she leaves at 10:30.
Anybody else? Oh, good to see you
We
back.
got online too.
There's $1. I'm just happy to say finally, after the urging of so many, I'm getting my COVID vaccine today at 1:40.
Wait, online.
Oh, sorry. Want to leave you out. Anybody else?
It's our 25-year anniversary this Sunday night. And so if you want to join us online or show up and get some salmon or chicken, you can do so. It's at our Christian Heritage Academy. It's the school connected to our church. And we're going to be celebrating 25 years of ministry, Pastor Deb and I and our staff.
You didn't hear that. Is that $25 they want to know?
That's free.
Anybody else happy? Okay, but people.
Where's Clint?
Where's Clint?
He's taking a nap.
He, he was there. Roger's in the.
I was taking notes.
Jeffy's here. Good morning. So I had Emily pick a number and I just checked mine and it was mine, 9199, so I am giving you back.
Okay.
Do you want this? Oh.
Thank you, and I think it was probably passed over on Pastor Paul that we were asking for $25 in happy dollars to commemorate your 25th anniversary. So we'll be seeing that in Venmo. Thank you, and this is a very spirited group this morning, and I really appreciate it. As the president, I have 3 months, 13 days, and 23 hours left of the presidency before Tom Von Hoppe. So Rain on Terror will soon come to an end. Please rise for our 4-way test. In the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Be careful out there. Oh, and please stick around for Richard's, not just Richard's, but our Tasteful Club meeting.
Thanks for letting me join.
Thanks, Bob.
Take care, Bob.
Thanks, Peg.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I realize it's.
Oh, you gotta go louder. Pull it out. Pull the mic out. Should be.
Oh.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
I realize it's getting kind of late here, so we'll get started right away and online. If you could please hold on. We'll let this meeting go here.
What can we here? What table should we go to?
Stand right here.
Stand right here.
They can.
We'll just stand right here.
This way you have the video and the mics.
So everybody with taste of Lakeville, if you could please muster smartly over here. We'll get this going. Taste of Lakeville.
Want me just to leave it?
Yeah. Well, it's today, since I'm watching.
So just kind of leave it just there. Do
Okay.
you need the extra mic or no?
I don't know.
That's just
Yeah.
you haven't had any issues.
Well, do you want to just leave it?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's all.
Okay. And then when I'm done, do you want me just to leave it here?
He was here with, to Roach or.
Okay, okay, yeah, because I think she was on vacation, but, yeah, I'll make sure I'll get up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back, I'll get it when I get back.
How do you do it, so that people online can talk, but we don't hear?
You know, you gotta shut. You unplug the speaker.
Okay.
There, and then you shut this off.
Okay.
And you mute.
Okay, so three things. Mute, unplug that, and turn that off.
Yep.
Okay, and then that's how they can talk amongst themselves, and then plug it all back in.
Yep, and you want to make sure you do a test.
Okay.
Okay, for those online, we're gonna try
Okay,
to get this
all right,
going.
perfect. Thank you so much, Kathy. All right, thank you. I'll talk to you later. Okay.
Okay, we gotta get this ship underway here.
Justin Miller has to leave, so.
Justin's gotta leave too, so we gotta. All right, 10 seconds. 9, 8. Okay, let's roll. Just while I'm thinking about it, the first thing I wanted to throw out there is maybe having the meeting, if we're gonna have it every other week, maybe having the meeting right after the main meeting might not be that good of an idea. If we want to set up a separate meeting time, and I'm pretty, we can do it by Zoom to have like a dedicated Taste of Lakeville meeting every other week instead of waiting after this meeting, because I'm late for a meeting. I know people have got to check out here. So we'll do the best we can now, but I'll throw that out there if we want to have propose a different time to have our every other week meeting for Taste of Lakeville. So who has to leave right now? Justin? Okay, you're we're not here.
He's muted. Try again, Justin.
No, I'm unmuted.
Okay, great.
We don't have anything to add. Things are going fine from operations. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that was easy. I'll just, so I'm sending out this abbreviated agenda. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna need one. I haven't really gotten around yet to, I've been hit with a lot of things right now, so I haven't gotten a timeline done yet, the timeline we used to use, but I am going through all the stuff that's out there and consolidating it on this agenda. I'm putting out every couple of weeks. So I appreciate everybody who just look at that and be aware of those issues, and we'll work from this for now. So moving down the list really quickly, we are getting more people to sign up. And today Beth joined Kohlenhofer, volunteered for auction to help target there. And she could do, particularly with the downtown group so low, we have somebody else with Beth has signed up there. Enough said right now on the home show, and the next meeting will be April Fool's Day. So moving right into just going down different teams. Lakeville Liquor Coordination, anything to go over there? We've got some issues out there with vendor support for the event, the auctions and the sponsors, the wine country box, and getting sponsorship information in the promotions for the wine in a box. Those are some of the key issues. Do we have anything to update on the Lakeville Liquor? Okay, I think the point's okay there. All right. Next. Next item is with auction. Oh, take it away.
Hey guys, sorry about that. My phone went off. But we had a good auction meeting yesterday. We welcomed Dan and Kathy and now Beth. So we're growing in numbers. From Lakeville Liquors, I think the email I got from Sheila after she had spoken with Tana was that we will have upwards to 60 line judging boxes available. So we're already with 60 items so far. We've got many more. Cheryl is going to be putting together a list with a subgroup of people of auction items that club members can contribute to. So be looking for that within the next week or two. That's all really, really good stuff. I don't have a whole lot to report other than that. There is a question that's burning, that's always been burning, and that's what the status is of our vendors. And have we received any feedback from anyone who's reached out to restaurants and gauged their interest in participating this year and how they would like to participate?
Okay, so good point. That's segueing right into our vendors.
Jim is
So
still in Egypt.
I think Jim is still, he's on the scuba diving, and Judy's helping him, but I don't think there was any specific input from the vendors. So yeah, that's a critical link in the chain, and we're trying to get better status. So hopefully in a couple of weeks, within a couple of weeks, we'll have some status on vendors. On the good news, I know he has done outreach, and we haven't had any cancellations. We had the one, I can't remember who that one.
I have to look.
I actually went into my notes. One person couldn't, because of the date to the state, but hopefully April Fool's Day, we'll have a better, or before that, we'll have a better update on vendors. Moving on. Anything else on auction, Lowell?
No, I'm waiting for Cody to speak up, and I think maybe Cheryl Morton and Kathy may have reached out to Tim Roach yesterday at Brackets about how sponsorships were going, and if there were any people from your sponsor list that we should be contacting who chose not to participate as a sponsor this year.
Okay. Segues right into sponsors.
So what's your question, Lowell, specifically about as to why not to reach out to the sponsors?
No. We don't reach out to them unless you've given us the green light and said that they're not going to be a sponsor. And then our auction team would reach out to them about providing an auction item instead.
Wonderful. Yeah, there are some changes this year. Colleen dropped off the gold sponsor. She hit her target mark of donation for lifetime to the Rotary. So we did lose a gold. We're trying to replace that. But we will fill you in on if we're getting rejections or not. It's going well. We're just waiting on getting people's invoices in and paid. And those are going to Nancy, I believe, invoices. So right, yeah.
That's correct.
We get confirmation from Nancy when those invoices go. She gets the invoices out, and then she'll get back to us when they're paid. I'm not sure who was paid or not yet, but we got a lot of confirmations. We do have a couple no's from previous years that were yes. A gold sponsorship loss is a big one. So if anyone has contacts that we can replace that gold with, we're trying our best. But that's everything to update on there. I guess the question is free tickets for sponsorships, and then how much tickets we're giving for in-kind sponsorships as well. So I mean, if someone wants to donate in kind up to a grant that qualifies as bronze still, I'm not sure. We'll have to get together with Kathy on that, I guess. So how many free tickets we're going to give for in-kinds, and just it's a little bit different sponsorships this year. A lot of people are carrying over from last year. Some monies, some people are doing in kind now where they didn't before. There's straight up sponsorships before. So we're just gonna have to get together on the specifics about that once the actual sponsorships or donations do come in. what does that translate into tickets or any other benefits? Okay, yeah, so, yeah, a lot of moving parts. We're just having a lot of transfers from money from last year, partially invoicing the difference if they want to maintain the same sponsorship level. So a lot of moving parts right now. I think we'll calm down here in a month or two, but that's where we're at.
So we hit operations site, nothing on here, Mark. I think Rachel's up there, but she's working on those pop-up banners and they'll be due for April 17th. Entertainment's okay. Tickets are on the horizon.
Can I add something for tickets?
Yes.
I've been approached from Groupon. Groupon called me and they're looking for events. So they threw out a 75% deal for Taste of Lakeville. And what they would base it off of would be the door price of $50. They would sell it at Groupon for $38. We would get $28, they would get $10. And we don't have to commit all of our tickets. We could just put out like 200 or 400, you know, whatever amount we want to put out there and see if you want to market tickets through their organization. So I just need to know if you want me to pursue that.
How many tickets do you sell not with the group every year? I mean, on top of, how many online tickets do you sell?
I would have to look that number up for you. It's better. It gets better, but we can actually use that promotion.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially this year.
I mean, it's a haircut
guys from 28, from 50 to 28.
Yep. And you can do it for advanced tickets only and cut off the date. So we're still getting that last month, let's say, of higher revenue.
And 200 tickets only, I would say, at max.
And you can increase that if you want, but.
And if you can, like I say, as long as it's advanced sale, because we know how that works the last 30 days. So.
Right.
But then you guys would also take into consideration, if we do it this year, you know, okay, we don't make a lot of money on it. We took a big haircut on that $22 off. People are going to be expecting it to subsequent years are going to get mad that it's not available. Okay. All right.
And I do see it as a one-year deal because next year, if they're fully up, they're going to be back to wanting 50% of the ticket price.
Okay.
I was say, I thought that percentage was pretty low, but they wanted to take it.
Yeah.
Right.
It'd be worth a try.
Okay.
The other thing, we're also looking at doing a rebate or discount for tickets back to vendors. That's something we got to have the vendor team in on that. We're looking at it as a way for incentives.
So should I pursue that to get more detail?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't sign anything.
No. that goes to Richard.
And they will call you every minute of every day.
Well, that's like that is.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, good, cool. Where are we at on raffle? I know my notes from last time, we didn't want to start raffle sales before the auction, but I think we're still planning on doing auction sales after the auction or raffle sales after the auction. I think we're still targeting that to do raffle.
That's what my understanding was. And truthfully, I have not reached out to the state yet. I will get that done before the next meeting.
I just want to throw that out there to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music. So we'll march forward on that, but I know there was a legal issue. We can't put the raffle up on the auction, so we'll start that after May. Always an exciting part of the whole thing, our VIP section.
Well, Tan and I met, and we do have some great ideas behind the scenes, so you're just all gonna have to wait. As you well know, auction is a priority right now, but I think we have what we need in place, at least as the groundwork, I should say. And Tana's working on a wonderful, I don't want to say grand prize, it would be whoever attends and buys the VIP ticket will be entitled to a wonderful surprise. So there's a very creative team with Tana, Amy from Flora, and Chris Myrtle. They're very creative, they have some wonderful ideas, and we're gonna blow the doors out, bring the windows out, or whatever. So, it'll be a surprise, but we really don't want to give a lot of information out until we get this auction out of the way, and then we can go full bore on the rest of the programs. So we're all in, we're on top of it. I just keep telling them, don't worry about it.
Okay, I think we're hitting most of the points. Any save rounds from anybody? All right. Kathy, anything?
Nope.
Okay. Adam, my trusty partner in crime, how we doing? Anything else we missed?
All is well. Great work, everyone.
Okay. Just to wrap up, I would entertain moving this meeting to some other time and conducting it by Zoom, since everybody's getting proficient with Zoom. We want to look at another time every other week to do this. But now we're moving to the most important part of the meeting. The double secret probation is Ben on who is the Taste of Lakeville team leader of the week. I know he's going to do real well on being able to announce this where he says, ready, break. That goes to Dave Oswald. You get to say, ready, break.
Well, first, I'm going to say hi to your husband, Mike, from Dave Oswald. Okay. Ready, break. Yeah, that's one.
Take care, everyone.